Part 1. The long tolerance the stars had always called to humanity. For thousands of years, people looked up at the night sky and wondered what was out there. When they finally built ships fast enough to reach other worlds, they expected to find wonders. They expected to find friends. What they found instead was a galaxy that did not want them. Admiral Marcus Cole stood on the bridge of his ship. The enduring hope. Through the wide windows, he could see the massive space station where the Galactic Concorde held its meetings. The station was beautiful, built from metals that shimmered like liquid silver. It was also a place where humanity had been humiliated more times than he could count. "Sir, the Valkyrie delegation has rejected our trade proposal," said Commander Lauren Price. She stood beside him, her hands clasped behind her back. Her voice was calm, but Marcus could see the anger in her eyes. "What reason did they give this time?" he asked. "They said our goods are not worthy of Valkyrie markets. They called our technology primitive." Marcus nodded slowly. He had expected this. The Valkyrie were beings made of living crystal. They had sailed between the stars when humans were still learning to make fire. To them, humanity was nothing more than clever animals who had somehow learned to build spaceships. The Galactic Concorde had existed for 12,000 years. It was a union of hundreds of species, all working together for peace and trade. At least, that was what they claimed. The truth was simpler and uglier. The strong species did whatever they wanted. The weak species suffered in silence. Humanity had joined the Concorde 63 years ago. They had come with open hands and hopeful hearts. They had offered friendship to every species they met. They had followed every rule, signed every treaty, and smiled at every insult, and in return, they had received nothing but contempt. Marcus remembered his first day at the Concorde station. He had been a young officer then, full of excitement about meeting alien races. A Drathini merchant had walked past him and spat on his uniform. When Marcus reported the incident, the Concorde officials had laughed. "The Drathini do not recognize humans as equals," they had explained. "You cannot expect them to treat you with respect." That was 63 years ago. Nothing had changed since then. On Earth, President Nathan Ellis gave speeches about patience and dignity. "We are young," he told the people. "The other species have had thousands of years to build their civilizations. We must prove ourselves worthy of their respect. We must show them that humanity is better than its enemies." So humanity smiled. They smiled when the Concorde placed limits on how many colonies they could build. They smiled when alien merchants charged them triple the normal prices. They smiled when their ambassadors were given tiny rooms and ignored in meetings. Commander Price turned away from the window. "Sir, I have to ask, how much longer can we keep doing this?" Marcus did not answer right away. He thought about the reports he had read that morning. 3 human cargo ships had disappeared near Drathini space. The crews were probably already in chains, being sold in the slave markets that the Drathini ran openly. The Concorde knew about these markets. They did nothing to stop them. "I don't know," he finally said. "I truly don't know." Back on Earth, a woman named Megan Torres sat in her office at the Defense Ministry. She was the Secretary of Defense, responsible for protecting humanity from all threats. It was a job that kept her awake most nights. On her desk was a file marked with red letters that said, "Classified." Inside were photographs from a human colony called Riverside. The colony had been attacked by raiders from the Sith Collective. 47 people were dead. The Sith had taken everything of value and left the bodies in the streets. Megan had sent a formal complaint to the Concorde. She had demanded justice for the victims. The Concorde had responded with a single sentence: "The matter has been noted." That was it. 47 human lives meant nothing to them. She picked up her phone and called Admiral Cole. When he answered, She could hear the tiredness in his voice. "Marcus, how did the trade talks go?" "Same as always. They rejected everything." Megan closed her eyes. "I got the Concord's response about Riverside today. Let me guess. They did nothing. They said the matter has been noted." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. When Marcus spoke again, his voice was different, harder. "Megan, I've been doing this for 40 years. 40 years of bowing and scraping the species that see us as insects. 40 years of watching our people suffer while the Concord looks the other way. I'm tired." "I know," she said softly. "We all are. The president keeps talking about patience, about proving ourselves. But I'm starting to wonder if we're just proving that we're easy targets." Megan looked at the photographs on her desk. A child's toy lay in the mud next to a burned house. Somewhere, a mother would never see her child again. "For now, we follow orders," she said. "We keep smiling. We keep trying. And if nothing changes..." She did not answer. She could not answer, because deep down, she was asking herself the same question in the halls of the Concord station. The alien delegates laughed about the humans. They joked about how easy they were to cheat. They bragged about the human ships they had captured and the human workers they had enslaved. To them, humanity was a joke. A small, weak species that was too stupid to fight back. They did not know that in hidden rooms on Earth, scientists were studying every piece of alien technology they could find. They did not know that human generals were quietly making plans. They did not know that behind every patient smile was a growing fire of rage. For 63 years, humanity had shown the galaxy its kindness. They had extended their hand in friendship again and again, only to have it slapped away. They had buried their dead and said nothing. They had swallowed their pride and kept hoping that things would get better. But hope was running out. Patience was running thin. And somewhere deep inside the heart of humanity, something was starting to change. The galaxy looked at humans and saw weakness. They saw a species that would never fight back. They saw easy prey. They were wrong. They just did not know it yet. Part 2. The breaking point, the colony of New Meridian, was a peaceful place. It sat on a green world at the edge of human space, far from the busy trade routes and political games of the Galactic Concord. 40,000 people called it home. They were farmers and teachers, doctors and builders. They had come to this distant world to make a new life for themselves and their children. Little Amy Porter was 7 years old. She loved her school, her friends, and the purple flowers that grew wild in the fields near her home. On the morning that would change everything, she sat in her classroom and listened to her teacher talk about the stars. One day, the teacher said, "Humans will be friends with all the species in the galaxy. We just have to be patient." Amy smiled and looked out the window at the clear blue sky. She did not see the dark shapes that were falling from orbit. She did not know that in less than an hour, she would be dead. The Carthex were an insectoid species. They had hard shells, multiple legs, and eyes that saw the universe in ways humans could not understand. They were also one of the most violent species in the Concord. Other races feared them and left them alone. When the Carthex discovered that New Meridian sat on top of valuable mineral deposits, they did not bother with diplomacy. They did not send messages or make demands. They simply came to take what they wanted. Their ships descended from the sky like a swarm of metal locusts. They landed in the fields and the streets. Soldiers poured out with weapons that burned and tore. They did not care who was in their way. The colonists had no warning. They had no army. They had nothing but their homes and their families and their hope that the universe was kind. That hope died with them. Captain Kevin Marshall was on patrol duty when the distress signal reached his ship. He was 3 days away from New Meridian, too far to help. All he could do was listen to the screaming and the crying and the desperate pleas for rescue that came through his radio dot, and then the signal went silent. When Kevin finally arrived at New Meridian, the Cartheks were gone. They had taken what they wanted and left. What remained was a graveyard. He walked through the ruins of the colony with his crew. The buildings were burned and broken. The streets were filled with rubble and ash. And everywhere, there were bodies. Kevin found the schoolhouse. The walls had collapsed. Inside, small shapes lay still among the scattered books and broken desks. He stood there for a long time, unable to move, unable to speak. His hands shook at his sides. "Captain," one of his crew members said. Her voice was barely a whisper. "What do we do?" Kevin looked at the bodies of the children. Some of them were still holding their learning tablets. Some of them had died running for the door. None of them had made it. "We document everything," he said. His voice sounded strange in his own ears, like it belonged to someone else. "We take pictures. We gather evidence. And we send it all to Earth." The news reached Earth 3 days later. The images spread across every screen on the planet. 40,000 dead. Men, women, and children. Murdered for minerals. Secretary Megan Torres watched the footage in her office. She saw the burned houses and the empty streets. She saw the small bodies covered with sheets. She saw the purple flowers that still grew in the fields, untouched by the violence that had destroyed everything else. She stood up from her desk and walked to the window. Outside, the sun was setting over the city. People were going home to their families, unaware of what had happened on a world far away. Her phone rang. People were going home to their families, unaware of what had happened on a world far away. Happened on a world far away. Her phone rang. It was Admiral Marcus Cole. "I assume you've seen the footage," he said. "I've seen it. The Cartheks are claiming it was an accident. They say they didn't know there were humans on the planet." Megan laughed bitterly. "An accident. They killed 40,000 people and call it an accident. It gets worse. The Concord is accepting their explanation. The Valkyrie delegates said humans should have known better than to build a colony so close to Carthek's territory." Megan closed her eyes. She thought about Amy Porter, whose name she had read in the casualty report. 7 years old. Loved purple flowers. Wanted to be a teacher when she grew up. What about justice? She asked. What about punishment for what they did? The Concord has issued a formal expression of concern. That's all. A formal expression of concern. For 40,000 dead. For children murdered in their classrooms. Something inside Megan Torres broke in that moment. Not her spirit. Not her will. Something else. Something that had been holding back the anger and the grief and the burning desire to make someone pay for what had been done. 63 years, she said softly. 63 years we have been patient. 63 years we have smiled and bowed and accepted every insult. And this is what we get. Our children dead in the dirt, and a formal expression of concern. Megan, what are you thinking? She turned away from the window. I'm thinking that we have been asking the wrong questions. We keep asking how to make them respect us. Maybe we should be asking how to make them fear us. There was silence on the other end of the line. Then Marcus spoke, and his voice was different now. It was the voice of a man who had finally stopped hoping. What do you need from me? Meet me at the Defense Ministry tomorrow. Bring everyone you trust. We need to talk about options. The next morning, Megan Torres stood before the United Earth Council. The leaders of humanity sat in rows before her, their faces pale with grief and shock. She had never seen them look so broken. For 63 years, we asked the galaxy to see us as equals, she began. We begged for scraps of respect while our people were murdered, enslaved, and forgotten. We followed every rule. We signed every treaty. We smiled at every insult. And yesterday, 40,000 of our people paid the price for our patience." She paused and looked at each council member in turn. "Today, I am not here to ask for anything. I am not here to beg. I am here to remind this council what humanity is capable of when we stop asking permission." The room was silent. No one moved. No one breathed. "The galaxy thinks we are weak," Megan continued. "They think we cannot fight. They think our patience means we do not know how to be strong. It is time we showed them how wrong they are." President Nathan Ellis stood up slowly. His face was gray with exhaustion and grief. "What are you proposing, Secretary Torres?" Megan smiled, and there was no warmth in it. "I am proposing that we stop being victims. I am proposing that we make the galaxy remember what happens when humanity stops being patient." The vote was taken that night. It was unanimous. Part 3. The silent preparations after the massacre at New Meridian. The galaxy expected humanity to react. The Concord prepared for angry speeches and desperate attacks. The Cartheks moved their fleets to defensive positions. Everyone waited for the humans to do something foolish. Instead, humanity went silent. The speeches stopped. The complaints stopped. Human diplomats smiled even wider than before and agreed to every demand. They accepted new trade restrictions without argument. They bowed deeper and spoke softer and seemed, for all appearances, to be completely broken. The Valkyrie laughed about it in their crystal halls. "The humans have finally learned their place," they said. "They know they can't fight us. They have accepted their fate. They were wrong. In a hidden base deep beneath the ice of Europa, one of the moons circling a gas giant in the home system, Intelligence Director Anthony Blake sat in a room filled with screens. Each screen showed something different. Troop movements of the Drothany Empire, trade routes of the Valkyrie Collective, fleet positions of the Carthek Swarm. For 2 years now, human agents had been spreading across the galaxy. They wore disguises and spoke alien languages. They pretended to be merchants, refugees, workers. They went everywhere, saw everything, and reported back to Anthony Blake. "Sir," said one of his officers, a young woman named Grace Chun, "our agent in the Carthek's home system has confirmed their fleet deployments. They have moved most of their ships to the outer territories." "Good," Anthony said. "Their home world is nearly undefended. They believe they have nothing to fear. They're right, aren't they? I mean, officially, we have nothing that could threaten them." Anthony smiled. It was a cold smile that did not reach his eyes. "Officially, we don't. But officially stopped mattering 2 years ago. In the asteroid belts of 12 hidden systems, humanity was building a new fleet. These systems had been discovered and kept secret, known only to a handful of people on Earth. No alien ships had ever visited them. No alien eyes had ever seen what was growing in the darkness between the rocks. Chief Engineer Samantha Gray walked through the shipyard of Hidden Station 7. Around her, massive machines worked day and night, turning raw metal into weapons of war. The ships being built here looked nothing like the diplomatic vessels the galaxy knew. These were warships, pure and simple, fast, deadly, and built with a single purpose. "How many are ready?" asked Admiral Marcus Cole. He had come to inspect the progress personally, traveling in secret to avoid detection. 64 capital ships, Samantha replied. 400 support vessels. 2,000 strike craft. All of them equipped with technology the Concord doesn't know we have. Marcus looked at one of the new ships. It was sleek and dark, designed to be invisible to sensors until it was too late. "Tell me about the weapons." Samantha smiled with pride. "For 60 years, the galaxy treated us like children. They gave us access to their basic systems because they thought we were too primitive to understand them. They let us study their technology because they believed we could never match it. She walked to a display screen and pulled up technical diagrams. They were wrong. We studied everything they showed us. We found the flaws they had missed. We improved on designs that they thought were perfect. These ships have weapons that hit harder and shields that hold longer than anything the Concorde has ever seen. And they have no idea? None. They still think our best ships are the patrol vessels we show them at border checkpoints. They have no idea what we've been building in the dark. Back on Earth, General Christopher Nash was training soldiers for a war that officially did not exist. In underground bunkers and mountain bases, hundreds of thousands of troops practiced tactics that had never been used before. They learned to fight in zero gravity. They learned to board enemy ships. They learned to defeat enemies who had ruled the stars since before humanity existed. Remember, Christopher told them during a training exercise, the aliens think we are weak. They think we are slow and stupid and afraid. That is our greatest advantage. When we strike, they will not believe what is happening. They will hesitate. They will panic. And in that moment of confusion, we will destroy them. In her office at the Defense Ministry, Megan Torres coordinated everything. She tracked the construction of ships. She monitored the training of soldiers. She reviewed the intelligence reports and made plans for every possible situation. One night, Admiral Cole came to see her. He looked tired but determined. "It's been 2 years," he said. "The troops are ready. The ships are ready. Our agents are in position. How much longer do we wait?" Megan stood at her window, looking out at the night sky. Somewhere up there, beyond the clouds, the aliens who had murdered her people were living their lives without worry. They had forgotten about New Meridian. They had moved on to other crimes. 6 more months, she said. We need to be perfect. When we move everywhere at once. They cannot have time to coordinate a response. They cannot have time to call for help. We hit them hard and fast, and we do not stop until they understand that everything has changed. And the Concorde? They have 1,000 species. Even with surprise, we cannot fight them all. Megan turned to face him. We don't have to fight them all. We just have to show them what we can do. Most of those 1,000 species have suffered under the Valkyrie and the Drothany, just like we have. When they see us winning, they won't lift a finger to help our enemies. You're betting a lot on that assumption. I'm betting everything on it. Because we have no other choice. We cannot go back to being victims. We cannot go back to smiling while they murder our children. Marcus nodded slowly. I've been waiting for this for 40 years. I just never thought I would live to see it. None of us did. But here we are. She walked to her desk and picked up a folder. Inside were the final battle plans, approved by the President and the full Council. 6 months from now, the galaxy will learn what humanity is capable of. They will learn that our patience was never weakness. It was a warning. And if they don't learn? Megan looked at the folder in her hands. Inside were orders that would send millions of humans into battle against enemies that had dominated the stars for thousands of years. It was the greatest gamble in human history. Then we will keep teaching them until they do. In the silent shipyards, the last of the weapons were loaded onto the new ships. In the training camps, the soldiers made their final preparations. In the hidden bases across the galaxy, human agents waited for the signal that would begin the war. Humanity had been patient for 63 years. They had smiled through every insult. They had buried their dead and said nothing. Now, they were ready to speak, and the galaxy was about to hear them roar. Part 4. The day the stars burned, the signal went out at midnight Earth time. A single coded message sent to every human ship, base, and agent across the galaxy. 3 words that would change everything. Begin the lesson. The Carthex homeworld was called Chitara. It was a hot planet covered with massive hive cities where billions of the insectoid aliens lived. Their great fleet was scattered across their territory, hunting for more resources to take. Only a small defense force remained to guard their home. They had nothing to fear. No species had ever dared to attack Chitara. The very thought was absurd. Admiral Marcus Cole stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Final Answer. Around him, 64 human warships waited in the darkness between stars. They had traveled through hidden routes, avoiding all detection. Now they were just minutes away from Chitara. "All ships report ready, sir," said Commander Lorem Price. Marcus looked at the tactical display. The Carthax had no idea they were coming. Their sensors were pointed outward, watching for threats from other directions. They never imagined that the weak little humans could reach them. "Send the attack order," Marcus said. "All ships, engage." The human fleet burst out of faster-than-light travel, like ghosts appearing from nowhere. Their weapons were already firing before the Carthax even knew they were there. Orbital defense platforms exploded in chains of fire. Guard ships were torn apart before they could raise shields. On the planet below, alarms screamed in the hive cities. Carthax warriors scrambled to reach their ships, but it was too late. Human strike craft swept through the skies, destroying hangars and fuel depots. Transport ships crashed in flames before they could take off. "Sir, the planetary defense grid is down," reported an officer. "Enemy fleet response is scattered and uncoordinated." "As expected," Marcus said. "They never trained for this. They never imagined anyone would dare attack them." He watched as another Carthax ship broke apart under human fire. "Disable their military infrastructure. Destroy their fleet. But leave the civilian hives alone." "We are not them, sir." The officer looked confused. "We could end them completely. Right now." Marcus turned to face him. "I said we are not them. They murdered our children because they saw us as insects. We will not become the monsters they are. Destroy their ability to make war. That is enough." Across the galaxy, similar scenes were playing out. In Drothany space, General Ashley Morgan led an attack on the infamous slave markets. For generations, humans and other species had been bought and sold in those dark stations. Now they were burning. "All prisoners are to be freed," Ashley ordered as her Marines stormed through the stations. "Every slaver is to be detained for trial. Anyone who resists is to be eliminated." Our soldiers moved with speed and anger. They had seen the pictures of humans in chains. They had read the reports of families torn apart. Now they were here to make it stop. In one of the holding cells, a human woman fell to her knees when she saw the Marines in their armor. "You came," she whispered. "I thought no one would ever come." Ashley helped her to her feet. "We're sorry it took so long, but we're here now, and no one will ever take you again." In the Velkari capital system, Ambassador Nicole Warren walked into the Great Assembly Hall of the Galactic Concord. She was flanked by 50 armed Marines in full battle gear. Behind her, through the massive windows, Velkari ships were burning in orbit. The alien delegates stared at her in shock. No human had ever entered this hall with weapons. No human had ever dared. Nicole walked to the central podium and looked out at the gathered aliens. The Velkari High Speaker, his crystalline body flickering with fear and anger, rose to speak. "This is an outrage." "You have no right to sit down," Nicole said coldly. The High Speaker sat. Nicole placed a data tablet on the podium. "This contains our terms for ending hostilities. You will release all human prisoners in your territories. You will pay compensation to the families of every human who died at New Meridian. You will surrender the Carthax leadership for trial. And you will agree to fundamental reforms of the Concord to prevent any species from being treated as we were treated." "You cannot demand this," said a Drothany delegate. You are one species against 1,000. Look out the window, Nicole replied. Tell me what you see. They looked. They saw Valkyrie battleships, the pride of their ancient fleet, drifting as burning wreckage. They saw human ships moving through the debris, untouched and untouchable. We are one species that you spent 60 years teaching to hate. And in those 60 years, while you were laughing at us, we were watching, learning, preparing for this moment. She leaned forward on the podium. You have one standard day to accept our terms. For every day you delay, we will dismantle another piece of your precious Concord. We have already destroyed the Carthex fleet. The Drothni are next. Then the Sith. Then anyone else who stands in our way. This is impossible, the High Speaker said. Your ships are primitive. Your technology is centuries behind ours. Nicole smiled. It was not a friendly smile. That's what we wanted you to think. Every time we pretended to be impressed by your basic systems, we were studying them. Every time we acted confused by simple technology, we were finding your weaknesses. You showed us everything we needed to know because you believed we were too stupid to understand it. She stepped back from the podium. Your arrogance was our greatest weapon. Your contempt made this possible. And now you will pay the price for underestimating humanity. In the space between worlds, the great Drothni war fleet gathered to crush the human rebellion. They had 1,000 ships, the largest force in the Concord. They outnumbered the human forces 3-1. Victory was certain. Admiral Cole met them in the void. The battle lasted 4 hours. When it ended, the Drothni fleet existed only as scattered debris floating in the darkness. Human ships moved through the wreckage, picking up escape pods and taking prisoners. They saved everyone they could, even those who had enslaved them. General Christopher Nash watched the final moments from his command ship. Send a message to Earth. Phase 1 complete. Awaiting orders for Phase 2. On Earth, President Nathan Ellis sat in his office, reading reports from across the galaxy. Every attack had succeeded. Every objective had been achieved. Humanity had done in one day what no species had done in 12,000 years. They had broken the Concord. He put down the reports and looked out his window at the stars. Somewhere out there, the aliens who had tormented his people were, realizing that everything they believed about humanity was wrong. He allowed himself a small smile. You thought our patience was weakness, he said softly to no one. Now you know the truth. The lesson had begun, and it was far from over. Part 5. The New Order, the Concord surrendered on the 9th day. It was not a close thing. By the end of the first week, the great powers that have ruled the galaxy for millennia were broken. The Carthex had no fleet left. The Drothni Empire had lost 3/4 of their warships. The Valkyrie, for all their ancient wisdom, had discovered that wisdom meant nothing against human weapons and human rage. The surrender ceremony took place in the Great Hall of the Concord Station, the same hall where humans had been mocked and ignored for 63 years. Now, the alien delegates sat in silence as Ambassador Nicole Warren read out the terms of peace. All human prisoners will be returned immediately. All species that participated in crimes against humanity will face trial. The Carthex military will be disbanded for the next 300 years. The Drothni slave markets are permanently abolished, and the Empire will pay compensation to every species they victimized. She paused and looked at the assembled aliens. Most of them could not meet her eyes. The Galactic Concord will be restructured. No species will ever again be treated as lesser. No crime against sentient beings will ever go unpunished. And humanity will sit on the High Council to ensure these principles are followed. The Valkyrie High Speaker rose slowly. His crystalline form, once bright with confidence, now seemed dull and tired. You ask us to give you power over the Concord. Why should we trust you with such authority? Nicole considered the question. 63 years ago, we came to the stars in peace. We asked for nothing but fairness. We were willing to be your friends. Do you remember how you answered us? The High Speaker said nothing. You laughed at us. You cheated us. You kidnapped our people and sold them as slaves. You murdered our children and called it an accident. Nicole's voice grew harder. We gave you every chance to treat us with basic dignity. You chose contempt instead. She walked closer to the High Speaker, looking up at the towering alien without fear. We do not ask you to trust us. We do not need your trust. We are simply telling you what is going to happen. You can accept it peacefully, or we can continue teaching you lessons until you do. The High Speaker was silent for a long moment. Then he bowed his head. We accept your terms. One by one, the other delegates voiced their agreement. The war was over. Humanity had won. In the weeks that followed, the galaxy began to change. Human ships carried freed slaves back to their home worlds. Families that had been separated for generations were reunited. Species that had suffered in silence under Concord rule finally had a voice. Admiral Marcus Cole visited New Meridian. The colony was still a ruin, but crews were already working to rebuild. A memorial stood in the center of what had been the town square, listing the names of all 40,000 who had died. He stood before the memorial for a long time, reading the names. Amy Porter, 7 years old. The girl who loved purple flowers. Commander Lauren Price found him there as the sun was setting. Sir, the rebuilding efforts are ahead of schedule. The first new settlers will arrive next month. Marcus nodded but did not look away from the memorial. We won, Lauren. We beat them. So why don't I feel happy? Because winning cost too much. Because it took too long. Because those children should still be alive. Yes, he reached out and touched one of the names carved in stone. We could have stopped this. If we had built our fleet earlier. If we had refused to be patient. Maybe none of this would have happened. Or maybe it would have been worse. Maybe they would have destroyed us completely before we were ready. Lauren stood beside him, looking at the names. We can't know what might have been. All we can do is make sure it never happens again. Marcus finally turned away from the memorial. That's why I keep going. Not for revenge. Not for pride. Just to make sure that no more human children die because the galaxy thought we were weak. On Earth, a ceremony was held to honor the heroes of the war. General Ashley Morgan received a medal for liberating the slave markets. Captain Kevin Marshall, who had first witnessed the horror of New Meridian, was promoted to admiral. Secretary Megan Torres was recognized for her role in planning the entire operation. But when it was her turn to speak, Megan did not talk about victory. 2 years ago, I stood before the United Earth Council and asked them to stop being victims. I asked them to remember what humanity was capable of. They trusted me with their hopes and their lives. And together we showed the galaxy something it had never seen before. She looked out at the crowd, at the soldiers and leaders who had made it all possible. But this war was not about proving that we are strong. It was about protecting those who could not protect themselves. The children of New Meridian. The slaves in Drothany chains. The countless humans who suffered because the galaxy saw us as easy targets. She paused, her voice growing softer. We did not fight to conquer. We fought so that no one would ever dare to harm us again. And now we must use our power not to dominate others, but to make the galaxy a better place than we found it. In the centuries that followed, humanity kept that promise. Under their guidance, the Galactic Concord became something new. Slavery was abolished across known space. Species that had been ignored for millennia finally had representation. Trade became fair. Justice became real. And whenever a powerful species grew too arrogant, Whenever they began to look at weaker races as prey, the elder races would stop them with a warning. "Be careful," they would say. "Be careful how you treat others." We once thought that patience meant weakness. We once believed that kindness could be taken for granted. And then we met the humans. The old ones would share the story with the young. They would tell of the species that smiled through every insult, that buried its dead and said nothing, that watched and learned and built in secret. They came to the stars asking only for friendship, the stories would say. We gave them hatred instead. And when their patience finally ended, the stars themselves burned with their anger. No species forgot the moment humanity's patience snapped out in the great archives of the Concord. The official record of the Human Retribution War included a quote from Admiral Marcus Cole, spoken on the day of victory. "You saw our kindness and called it weakness. You saw our patience and thought it was fear. You saw us smile while you tormented us and assumed we did not know how to fight. Every moment of restraint was a choice. Every diplomatic solution was a mercy. You had 12,000 years to build your civilization. We had 60 years of rage. Remember this lesson well. Humanity's patience is not weakness. It is a gift, and it can always be taken away." The galaxy remembered Dot, and they never made the same mistake again.